What's up, fantasy people? The Dolphins ordered a 70 burger with cheese. The Colts are friskier than we thought. And speaking of frisky, we saw Travis and Taylor sitting in a tree. And it is confirmed that they are KISSING. This week on the True North Fantasy Pod, let's get it. What's up, guys? You are back with the True North Fantasy Football Pod. I am Trav, hosting and West Coasting for you today, and it feels really good to say that because this is a bit of a relaunch of the True North Fantasy Pod. We'll get into that a little bit later. I don't want to waste too much time here. Just thank you for joining. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and following on the socials. If you're not already, please make sure you go and do that. You can find that in the episode description. Lots of stuff to talk about today, though. We're going to unpack some situations around the NFL. We've got some situations that are a bit of a conundrum for us so far in fantasy football. And today we're going to look at a few of those and try and figure out what we can do with them. And we're going to start in Miami. Holy shit. That 70 burger was incredible. 10 touchdowns for the Miami Dolphins, 70 points put up on the Denver Broncos, and it was an absolute shellacking. Not much to say for the Dolphins. Really, my advice is you can just start them all. I think every player on this team has the ability to pop off with little volume. I think all of these guys are big play threats. Raheem Mostert has been one of the best big play running backs in the league for years. Devon Achane, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I think he said that's how he wanted it pronounced. I don't know. He was insane this past week. Just insane explosiveness. That was awesome to see him get on the field and do that. The wide receivers, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, we know that. Tua is an absolute every week start at quarterback. So not a whole lot to get into with the Miami Dolphins unless we see a trend otherwise, that a guy is like continuously having dud games, then you might want to look at that. But really, any given week, 3 plays and anybody on this offense can be top 12 at their position. So not too much analysis on the Dolphins end, just because that team, you start them all. Durham Smythe is obviously a bit of a question. Their third wide receiver, River Craycraft, maybe Robbie Chosen. He did have a big week in week 3. So you don't want to get sucked in by Robbie Chosen, formerly Robbie Anderson. But all those other guys that I talked about, you start those guys every week and you don't even look back. Okay, going to Kansas City, big Kelce with Taylor Swift. I mentioned at the top there, they are KISSING. He has somewhat confirmed that on his show New Heights with his brother Jason Kelce this past week. And the Chiefs actually won too, in case you didn't hear. They had a really big game, beating the tar out of the Chicago Bears 41-3, I think it was. It's a pretty ugly one for Chicago. Obviously a great showing for old Kelce in front of T-Swift. When we look at the Chiefs side, in terms of them for fantasy football, you start Travis Kelce, you start Patrick Mahomes. I don't think you can really start any of these receivers right now. None of them have more than 12% of the team's targets through 3 weeks. No bueno. We look at Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Sky Moore. They've run the most routes, but only at 65% of the team's snaps, and no other wide receiver on the Chiefs is over 40% snaps. So I'm really having a hard time starting these guys, and I would advise not to. The only one really that deserves to be on rosters, in my opinion, should be Sky Moore for that kind of youthfulness and ability to maybe emerge as the main guy. MVS is going to get some deep targets. He definitely will, but none of it's going to be consistent enough for you to rely on and throw him in even your flex spot. Rashee Rice, he's more of a deep stash if you have a long bench or if you have that roster spot, because he is tied for the lead with Sky Moore among Chiefs wide receivers for targets. We do see the next few matchups. They play the Jets, Minnesota, Denver twice, and the Chargers in the next 5 weeks. It's a pretty cakey schedule against the pass right now. So Rashee Rice is a speculative stash for sure. If I have 5 bench spots in a redraft league, I am not stashing him. If I have 7, maybe 8, which is a massive bench for one of those leagues, I'd put him at the bottom there. But MVS just can't be taking up one of those roster spots. So Sky Moore as a potential, Rashee Rice as a speculative add, and none of the other wide receivers. And I think the running backs, they're something else, man. Like, we look at that Clyde week, he had 55 yards. He had the touchdown in week 3, but I'm really not falling for that just yet. 9 of his 15 carries came in the fourth quarter with a big lead. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire belongs on waiver wire still. Jerick McKinnon, He's pretty sneaky because he scored the most fantasy points in this backfield in week 3. He had 2 tud bangers in the red zone, so that's nice to see for McKinnon. And he's getting most of that goal line work. But this team's only thrown the ball 7 times inside the 5-yard line compared to 4 rushes. So there's not much meat on that bone for these guys inside the 5, which is where we want to see it. And I don't really want Isaiah Pacheco manning a starting spot on my team either. This was really his first double-digit fantasy point game of the season. First game where he hit 15 touches, and he's taken almost double the snaps over the other 2. So he's not earning touches, even though he's getting most of the snaps at running back. So I don't know, man. Not much target work here for these running backs in Kansas City, and there never really has been. That was the big draw with Clyde coming in when they drafted him. But the lucrative work for these running backs just isn't there. The week 3 performances, those were nice, but I'm not really in on this backfield. Pacheco and McKinnon, maybe last resort flex fill-ins, but that's about it. Just to touch on that Bears side, it was a rough one. These guys are basically dead. Justin Fields is barely startable in fantasy, although he's pretty tantalizing with that speed combo, as well as what looks like a very shitty passing game right now, to be honest with you. He's the quarterback 17 through 3 weeks, but this guy should be a staple in our quarterback top 10, and he's just not that right now. Only 3 other quarterbacks with at least 20 pass attempts have a worse completion percentage than does Justin Fields. His receivers are dropping passes. Just can't trust anyone on this team. I think you might be able to get some starts out of Justin Fields because they are going to be playing a ton of catch-up. We know that, but you're not really stoked about it right now until you see it. They get the Broncos this week, so that's hopefully a nice little get-right game, but you never can tell with this Bears offense. Just quickly on those running backs, Roschon Johnson was a dart throw to start for me last week. That didn't really pan out with his 5.9 fantasy points. He did get more carries than Khalil Herbert, but not more snaps. So these guys are just kind of pine riders for our fantasy team right now until one of them emerges. I do lean towards Roschon Johnson for his ability to get targets in these games where they're going to be behind, but he's another kind of deep stash on the bench, and you don't start him until you see nothing. All right, the Indianapolis Colts, they beat Baltimore 22-19 in an overtime joint this week. Gardner the Hardener had people at full mast with that W, and this Colts team's kind of frisky, guys. They have many more useful pieces than we expected coming in, and if you follow the channel, you will have seen my week 1 video where I said that Anthony Richardson is a locked and loaded quarterback 1 play. He's coming back this week, it looks like, so you start him 100%, plug him and play him. The wide receiver volume has actually been really good for this team, where I did not think it was going to be coming into the season. Michael Pittman's currently the wide receiver 8 on the season. Love to see that with their kind of quarterback transition phase that they're going through right now. Fringe top 12 wide receiver for me rest of the season, Michael Pittman. What he's doing with a growing and transitioning offense tells me that when this offense is a little bit more established, he can do a lot more than what he's doing right now. So I love Michael Pittman for the rest of the season. And I haven't historically been a big Pittman supporter, but now that we're seeing Anthony Richardson and the fact that he's still carrying that heavy target share through, that's positive signs for me. Josh Downs, that rookie receiver that they just got this past year, he's getting some good run too, even though my man Alec Pierce has been on the field more than has Josh Downs. Downs led the team in week 3 with 12 targets, which is huge. Super encouraging signs for him as well. You're not starting him this coming week against the Rams. They're one of the better pass defenses in the league thus far. But after that, they get the Titans and the Jags, who are 2 of the worst pass defenses in the league. So I think there's a nice little stretch upcoming where Josh Downs, if you add him this week for free, potentially on your waiver wires or super cheap in fab, he could increase that value as we come into those cake matchups for him, like what we're seeing from Josh Downs. I will say I do think that these receivers could be a little bit touchdown capped with the Colts' focus on the run game and the inevitable lumps taken by rookie Anthony Richardson. We also saw in week 1 a little bit of a tush-push play from Shane Steichen to get Anthony Richardson in for a touchdown, but I think you're happy with the results thus far for these pass catchers. Keep your eye on Kylen Granson. Don't add him now, but he has been getting some targets in that offense, especially with Anthony Richardson in the first couple of weeks. So Kylen Granson as a tight end who's going to get targets, which is basically all you want among the tight end landscape. Kylen Granson could be a speculative for the next couple of weeks with that cake schedule as well, but I wouldn't be adding him just yet. See how it shakes out when Richardson comes back for sure. Okay, the running back room. That was something else with Zach Moss, 30 carries over a C note and 2 touchdowns in week 3. And he's always been kind of a short-term proposition with JT set to come back, hopefully, But yeah, with Zach Moss being that short-term proposition, I would definitely be looking to put him into a trade off that big performance. Could hurt your running back room. There's been a lot of injuries, and he might be a piece that you're relying on right now. But if you can package him in a trade to upgrade a position, I think you should probably look at doing that, because when JT comes back, he's going to just be a net zero. But until JT comes back, Moss is going to be a locked-in running back too. So if you can't afford to trade him, you start him every week while JT is still on the sidelines. And as we saw this week, Zach Moss has a little bit of upside that comes along with him, and we didn't really think that was present here. I think he will need a heavy carry volume in order to realize that upset. He's not going to be doing it on 12 to 15, and I don't think he's going to be getting 30 every game. But I think if he's in that 20-plus range, he could have some solid RB2 weeks while JT is on the sideline, of course. And of course, Jonathan Taylor, the elephant in the Indianapolis Colts locker room. I'd be going out there and looking to buy. I would put out some feelers to acquire him, especially if I'm a contender, mainly if I'm a contender and you see that Jonathan Taylor team in your league is 0-3 or maybe 1-2, scrambling at the running back position. Might not want to wait for Jonathan Taylor to come back off the PUP list there. So you can go out there and put a feeler, shore up that person's roster for the next few weeks, and in turn give yourself a potential league winner for when Jonathan Taylor potentially comes back. And we really got to just hope that Jim Irsay comes to his senses, maybe gets sober for a minute or two and realizes that Jonathan Taylor is going to be really good for this team instead of doing sleazy shit to try and keep him off the field. But you've got to just kind of assume positivity, even though with Jim Irsay, that's kind of a hard thing to do. So, like I said, Jonathan Taylor could come back and be a league winner. So I think you go out and put some feelers out for him in your league if that's something that seems reasonable for your roster and for the roster that you'd be acquiring from. On the flip side of that Colts win are the Baltimore Ravens. I think now we know that they're not going to be that new hotness, wide open offense with Todd Monken at the helm as offensive coordinator. I think we're kind of back to where we always were with these guys, with only one pass catcher being really viable in any given week. And so far, that still has not been Mark Andrews. That has been Zay Flowers. And I'm concerned about Mark Andrews. And the reason being is because Zay Flowers is a lot different than the other receivers that they've had in the room previously. Hollywood Brown, Sammy Watkins, Rashad Bateman even was brought in to kind of take up off the top of the defense and be that big play threat. Whereas Zay Flowers is running a lot more short routes, getting a lot more design plays, which is not great for Mark Andrews. Those guys were going to go downfield and clear out for Mark Andrews, and Zay Flowers has been taking those short targets, doing work after the catch, and like I said, getting those design plays called for him. Zay Flowers has been the first read on 36% of this team's dropbacks thus far, and you can officially color me concerned. Like I said, Andrews has only been the first read on about 20% of the time, with only 2 games played this year, of course. But last year, Mark Andrews was the first read on over 30% of the Ravens' dropbacks. So not good, Bob. Not good. The Ravens have already run 128 plays with 3 or more wide receivers on the field as well, which is almost half the amount already that they ran all of last year. So this Baltimore offense has changed a little bit, but it hasn't been for the better. And I think we're going to see that it's to the detriment of Mark Andrews. So I hate to say it because we are huge Mark Andrews fans here on the True North Fantasy Pod, but I might be trying to go throw a Mark Andrews out there to maybe downgrade to maybe a Hunt or a TJ Hawkinson. Maybe you go and get Sammy the Door Laporta and add some other pieces to shore up other positions and really capitalize on that name value of Mark Andrews, because we do know already, independent of Zay Flowers, he already is a guy who's on the trainer's table a lot with injuries. So when you factor in that there's a young, hot rookie that's kind of taking a bunch of his work right now, I'm not mad at going and shopping Mark Andrews around, which was not something that you would have heard me say up until like 6 months ago, potentially. So it's hard to say. We hope we see a little bit of a turnaround, because I get it. Mark Andrews can be an elite option. We do want him to be seen in the red zone getting those targets, but we just haven't seen it yet. And I am a little bit worried, maybe more so than I have been in previous years when he's had those dips. Okay, the last situation I'm going to take a look at is the Dallas Cowboys. And let me tell you, Kellen Moore feels like but a distant memory for these Cowboys. Definitely they have some puzzle pieces that could resemble those high-flying offenses of the past, but it's not looking like this offensive coordinator hire in Brian Schottenheimer is proving to be a good one so far for the Dallas offense. I think the running game is fine. Tony Pollard, he's the focal point here and the safest piece of this puzzle. He is the running back 4 through 3 weeks. He leads the league in carries. He's 4th in yards, 3rd most yards after contact. Nothing to see there. He's basically a top 5 running back option the rest of the way if healthy. But the rest of the offense is what I'm really worried about here for Dallas. Dak Prescott. I mean, we don't expect an elite performer out of Dak Prescott, but so far he is the quarterback 22, and I think even that is below his standards as kind of one of those solid back of the top 12 tier quarterbacks. He's not even that this season. He's only got 3 touchdowns through 3 games. Now some of his game script has led to more reliance on that run game, which isn't good for his fantasy prospects. He hasn't cracked 20 fantasy points yet, and he's fallen barely even stream worthy, like I said. After what was supposed to be a juicy matchup against Arizona in week 3, that was an absolute stinker, and they got beat by those Arizona Cardinals. Looking at Dak as a potential fantasy starter, you're sitting him the next 2 weeks. They've got New England this coming week and the 49ers the week after. So you leave him on the wire for now. You can pick up a guy like CJ Stroud to fill in. But yeah, Dak Prescott's not going to be a great start the next couple weeks. After that, they do get the Chargers. So that is a nice little bounce back. But we got to really see how they're playing, because there could still be some better options there, right? Looking at the wideouts in Dallas, it's not been good either. We're used to multiple wide receivers performing, high-flying offense, like I said, big weeks out of these guys, namely CeeDee Lamb. But CeeDee has not been the top 10 wideout that we expected coming into the season. And it's not anything he's doing wrong. It's not really anything Dak's doing wrong, because the efficiency numbers look all right. Among wideouts with 20-plus targets, CeeDee is 4th in yards per target, top 10 in yards after the catch. He's got over 42% of the team's receiving yards. And on the Dak side, Dak has a passer rating of 114.1 when he targets CeeDee, and almost 88% of CeeDee Lamb's targets have been catchable so far this year. So it's really just kind of the offense, the volume, and the quality of volume, really, because he's given you lots of the things that we want in that top 10 wideout, but the quality of volume's not been there. Those lucrative touches that I talk about. And for wideouts, that's deep targets and red zone targets. Looking at CeeDee, he's only got 2 deep targets on the year and 2 targets in the red zone. Jake Turd Ferguson is leading the NFL with 8 red zone targets through 3 weeks. And we look at red zone carries, Tony Pollard has 24 of those, which leads the league by 10 over second place Christian McCaffrey with 14. So I think these wideouts are capped. No cap. Did I do that right? I don't know. But looking at the other guys, man, like if CeeDee's capped, then the other guys are capped too, right? These wideouts, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup, rest of season. I think I lean towards Brandon Cooks turning into the better fantasy asset overall, but there's going to be some weekly fluctuation. Gallup, we saw in week 3, got those 7 targets. That's tough to trust too, with them playing from behind and having to throw the ball in that game. They're not going to be doing that a lot with this defense, and 4 of Gallup's 7 targets were in the 4th quarter. Brandon Cooks got the higher snap share against the Cardinals, and in week 1, Cooks saw 4 targets to Gallup's 2 on just a touch lower route share in that week 1 game. Completely opposite game script from week 3, though. So I don't know if we know what this offense can be, but we do know right now that the pass catchers are ceiling capped, and Cooks and Gallup cannot be started at this point. Gallup should barely be on your roster, but I get it. I really like him, and I'm hopeful he can bounce back to something. But I just don't think this Brian Schottenheimer offense is going to be conducive to multiple receivers producing consistently from week to week. I'm fine with stashing them on the bench. I know Brandon Cooks, he's the new guy coming in. He's just coming back from an injury, so he could emerge. Stash him on your deep bench. Cooks more so than Gallup, but the leash is getting real short for these guys. Real short. Okay, guys, that's all we got for this week's video. The True North Fantasy Pod is back, baby. If you have any given week, if you have any situations that you want me to unpack, please hit the DMs or comment on any of the socials. You can find us at True North FFB on Instagram, Twitter, and then find us at True North Fantasy Football on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to keep up with everything. Having fun being back, working on consistency, guys. I totally get it. I'm weaving this into real life, but I'm having a lot of fun being back. So stick around. The consistency is going to come, and then so will those fantasy W's. So until next week, thanks for showing up, guys. Really appreciate it. Peace.